This lesson will be on inverse functions. This is section 1.9 in your textbook. The essential questions for this lesson are: what are inverse functions? How do you verify that two functions are inverse functions? And how do you find inverse functions algebraically? Inverse functions basically are where you take one function and you interchange the domain and the range to come up with a second function. That second function will be an inverse of the first. A more formal definition of inverse functions is: functions f and g are considered inverse functions if f of g of x is equal to x and g of f of x is equal to x. So now let's look at an example. Let's assume we have two functions, an f function which is equal to 5 over x minus 2, and an h function which is equal to 5 over x plus 2. And I would want to determine whether f and h are inverses of each other. So initially let's take f of h of x. So we're going to take h of x, which is 5 over x plus 2, and we're going to substitute it in for x in the function f. So as you can see in the example here, we end up with 5 over x, which ends up being equal to x. Well, we're halfway there. This is equal to x. Now let's see if the other composite function is equal to x. So now we have h of f of x. So we take f of x, which is 5 over x minus 2, and we plug it in for x in the h function. So we end up with 5 over x minus 2, and that whole thing plus 2. Well, that first complex fraction simplifies to be x minus 2 plus 2, or it comes out equaling x. So, as you can see here, both of these composite functions are equal to x. So therefore, f and h are indeed inverse functions. Now I would like you to pause the video and take a look at two new functions, f and h, where f is x minus 4 over 7 and h is 7 over x minus 4, and do this test on your own and see if these two functions are inverses of each other, and post your answer in the drop box. Once you have done that, you can resume the video. Well, how do you determine whether a function has an inverse? Because not all functions have inverses, obviously. So we use something called the horizontal line test for inverse functions. And this test simply states that a function s has an inverse function if and only if no horizontal line intersects the graph of f at more than one point. It's much like the vertical line test for functions, okay? So if the horizontal line intersects the graph of f at only one point, then you know that it has an inverse. So assuming that a particular function has an inverse, how do we find what that inverse is? The first thing we do is take our function f of x and replace f of x with y. We then interchange x and y and solve for y. We then replace y with f to the minus 1 of x in the new equation. And this is how we illustrate an inverse function. So let's look at an example. Let's find the inverse function of f of x is equal to 2x plus 1. So, as was stated earlier, I substitute y for f of x. Then I swap x and y, or interchange them if you will. Then I solve for y. In this case I get x minus 1 over 2. And then I substitute f to the minus 1 of x, which is the symbol for inverse function. So the inverse function of 2x plus 1 is x minus 1 over 2. Okay, now I would like you to find the inverse function of f of x equals x over 2 and post your answer in the drop box. Remember, the written work for your homework will not always be on the last page of the video, so you have to watch the whole video to make sure that you get all the written work that's requested of you.